My phone lit up at 9:17 p.m. with a message that looked harmless. 3 plain words. I'm still fine. Most people would read it and kept scrolling. I nearly dropped my mug because 30 years ago, in a worn booth at a diner outside Fort Liberty, I'd taught my little sister the difference between fine and still fine. If she was safe, she'd write, I'm fine. If she couldn't speak freely, if someone was hovering, listening, controlling the room, she'd add the extra word. One word meant she needed help. I stared at the screen long enough for the coffee to go cold. Then I did what 20 years in the army trained me to do. I stopped guessing and started building a picture. And I gave myself 15 minutes to decide whether I was being paranoid or late. 15 minutes later, I was on the road. I retired at 56 and moved into a small place outside Richmond. The kind of house that always has one project waiting. The porch rail that needs sanding, the mailbox that never sits straight, weeds that treat flower beds like an invitation. I liked the quiet. I liked that the neighbors only knew me as Dana Carter, the widow who volunteered at the shelter and brought cobbler to fundraisers. I didn't correct them. After 2 decades of deployments and briefings, and the constant noise of responsibility, anonymity felt like rest. My sister Lena lived 40 minutes away. 4 years younger, softer around the edges in a way I never was. I climbed fences, she rescued stray cats. I joined the service, she became a school librarian. When our parents died, we held on tighter to each other. Sunday lunches became our routine, sandwiches, coffee, small talk that wasn't small to me. She married Mark Ellison 8 years ago. At first, he was easy to like. Confident smile, firm handshake, the guy who helped neighbors move couches and remembered birthdays. The kind people label solid, but charm is often just good lighting. Around year 3, Lena started fading in small, almost invisible ways. I'd ask where she wanted to eat, and she'd glance at Mark first. I'd ask if she could spend a weekend with me, and she'd say, let me check, like she needed permission for her own calendar. She'd start a sentence and Mark would finish it, correcting details as if she were a student, and he was grading. I told myself it was normal marital rhythm. Then it became a pattern. Patterns don't care what you want to believe. Once, on their patio, Mark laughed into his beer and said, Dana, you've never really had a demanding job, have you? I smiled like it didn't land. I'd managed troops in heat that melted plastic and made decisions that came with casualty notifications attached. But I'd learned long ago that the quickest way to hand someone power is to show them what they've provoked. He kept going, casual and cutting. Lena's the capable one. Always has been. It wasn't the words. It was the pleasure underneath them. How much he enjoyed being underestimated, and more importantly, how much he enjoyed deciding what women were. After that, the comments came regularly. Dana worries too much. Dana doesn't understand money. Dana's too nice. Lena would sit there with that polite, fixed smile people use when they're trying to keep a room from tipping into something worse. Then the changes got sharper. Lena stopped answering calls quickly. Visits were too busy more often than not, and when plans got canceled, it was Mark texting from her phone. Her friends stopped dropping by. She went fewer places alone. One afternoon in the garage, I noticed bruises near her wrist. What happened? I asked. She tugged her sleeve down fast. Shelf corner. I'm clumsy. Too quick. Too practiced. I didn't press. Fear doesn't respond well to interrogation. But I watched more carefully after that, and I waited for an opening. The opening arrived as 3 words at 9:17 p.m. I didn't call her. If someone was monitoring, a call would only raise the temperature. Instead, I pulled a notepad from my desk drawer and started writing a timeline like I used to. Message received 9:17 p.m., meaning can't speak freely. I scanned our recent texts, conversations cut short, calls under 10 minutes, and a detail that made my jaw set. Cancellations almost always came from Mark, not Lena. At 9:29, I called someone who lived 2 houses down from her, Patty Grimes, a retired nurse with the kind of eyes that miss nothing. She answered on the 3rd ring. Dana? Everything all right? I need a favor, I said. When's the last time you saw Lena? A pause, too long for a simple answer. Few days ago. How did she seem? Patty exhaled slowly. Not good. I stared at my dark window like it might show me what was happening. Tell me I've heard them fighting. More lately. Lena crying. My grip tightened. Anything else? Another hesitation. I haven't seen her driving in a while. Couple months, maybe. And Mark fired their housekeeper. Lena had arthritis in both knees. That help wasn't a luxury, it was support. People who isolate others don't start with handcuffs. They start by quietly removing options. I thanked Patty and hung up. At 9:34, I sent Mark a short text, a probe, something that would tell me how he wanted to frame reality. Thinking about stopping by tomorrow. Hope you're both well. His reply came almost instantly. We're fine. Lena says hi. No warmth. Just a statement that sounded like a door being shut. I grabbed my keys and left. I didn't park in their driveway. I stopped half a block away and walked in, letting my eyes take inventory. Porch light on. 2 windows lit downstairs, 1 upstairs. Nothing dramatic. That's the thing about controlled homes. They can look peaceful from the street. Near the side yard, I found an angle to the living room window through a gap in the curtains. Lena sat on the couch, shoulders trembling. She was crying silently, trying to fold herself smaller. Mark stood nearby, watching her the way a man watches a problem he wants to solve by force. Then he crossed to the front door, checked the lock, and locked it again, as if repeating it made it truer. My pulse slowed, not sped up. Uncertainty had evaporated. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was confinement with nicer furniture. I walked to the porch and rang the bell. Inside, movement stopped. Silence stretched long enough to feel deliberate. Finally, the door opened. Mark's expression flickered. Surprise first, then the social mask. Dana, it's late. It is, I said. I wanted to see Lena. She's fine. I'll ask her. His smile thinned, but he stepped aside just enough to avoid looking suspicious. A moment later, Lena appeared in the hallway. Her eyes were red. There was a faint mark near her wrist, and she couldn't keep her gaze on Mark for more than a heartbeat. Dana, she said softly, and the relief in her voice hit me like a physical thing. I was worried, I told her. She glanced at Mark, then back at me. I'm fine. The words were wrong, flat and rehearsed, like lines fed to her offstage. Can I come in, I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Mark couldn't refuse without exposing himself, so he let me enter. The house told its own story. Indoor security cameras in corners where they didn't belong. Fewer books than I remembered. Her reading chair gone. Family photos replaced by framed quotes about gratitude and attitude. Decor that felt less like taste and more like instruction. We sat. Mark positioned himself close to Lena. Not affectionate close, monitor close. I made small talk and watched him do what controlling people do when they're sure no one will stop them. He spoke over her. Corrected her, answered questions meant for her. I tested the boundary. Lena, are you still volunteering at the library on Thursdays? Mark cut in immediately. No, I kept my eyes on my sister. I asked Lena. The room went quiet in a way that made Mark's jaw tighten. Lena looked down at her hands like she was bracing for consequences. That told me everything I needed. After a few more minutes, I stood. I should go. Lena's face fell, quick and involuntary. She didn't want me to leave. At the door, I said, Lena, can you help me carry something to my car? Mark frowned. What something? A box of books. There are no books. I looked at him calmly. Then you won't mind her helping me with nothing. For the first time that night, Lena almost smiled. Mark, cornered by his own need to appear reasonable, let her step outside with me. The moment the door shut behind us, I lowered my voice. How bad is it? Her composure cracked like thin ice. Tears came fast. That bad, she whispered. He hurts you, I said, not as a question. She shook her head, then faltered, then nodded. Not always. But, how long? 2 years. 2 years of my sister rationing her own life to keep a man calm. The guilt was immediate and ugly, but I shoved it aside. Guilt can wait, safety can't. What do you need from me? I asked. She lifted her face, and for a second, I saw the Lena I grew up with. The one who could be brave when she stopped believing she had to be polite. A way out. You have one, I said. We'll do this carefully. A car door slammed somewhere down the street. Both our heads turned. Time was short. Tomorrow, I said. Start gathering what matters. IDs, account numbers, statements, anything with your name on it. Make copies. Hide them where he won't look. Can you do that? She swallowed hard. Yes. Before she went back inside, she asked me, voice small. Why aren't you scared of him? Because Mark wasn't the first bully I'd met. He was just the first one who thought my quiet meant harmless. I've dealt with worse, I told her. Go inside. Act normal. I'll handle the rest. Over the next few weeks, we didn't communicate the usual way. Mark monitored her phone, so we used quieter routes. Short emails tucked into book recommendations, messages passed through a trusted friend from the library, a call made from a grocery store parking lot. And Lena worked. When Mark showered, when he ran errands, when he got lazy and assumed she'd stop trying, she copied paperwork. The evidence piled up faster than I expected. Financial records, insurance documents, account transfers that made no sense. Then Lena called me from her car, voice shaking. Dana, there's another account. What kind? A savings account in both our names. I didn't know it existed. How much? She hesitated. About $160,000. Mark had spent years claiming they couldn't afford trips, repairs, a better mattress, while quietly stacking money that Lena didn't even know she owned. It wasn't just control, it was theft wearing a wedding ring. We took everything to an attorney. Helen Pierce, mid-60s, sharp-eyed, the sort of professional who doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't need to. She read through the stack, removed her glasses, and looked at Lena. "How much does your husband know?" Helen asked. "Nothing," Lena said. Helen's mouth curved into the smallest satisfied smile. "Good. Then we can protect you before he scrambles." They built the plan: freeze what could be frozen, document what couldn't, file in a way that kept Lena safe. A relocation plan. A list of essentials. A simple instruction that mattered most: do not warn him. Then, as if Mark couldn't stand being left out of his own downfall, Lena found proof of an affair. Messages, receipts, a trail of careless arrogance. It wasn't revenge material. It was leverage, and leverage is what gets controlling people to stop negotiating with threats and start negotiating with reality. We waited for the right moment. Mark provided it. He decided to throw himself a birthday party at a country club. Big room, big guest list, big performance. He loved an audience. He loved being seen as the good husband, the successful man, the one everyone admired. He didn't understand that a stage works both ways. The night of the party, Mark floated from group to group with a drink in hand, collecting laughter like it was currency. Lena stood beside him in a fitted dress that looked like obedience from a distance, but I noticed her posture: steady, controlled, ready. Helen arrived in a navy suit, carrying a slim folder. Mark noticed her and frowned, confused for half a beat. Confusion turned to concern, then to something closer to fear. Helen approached with calm precision and spoke quietly to Lena. Lena stepped forward, accepted the papers, and placed them into Mark's hands. In a room full of conversation, silence spreads fast when something real happens. Mark scanned the first page. Color drained from his face in slow waves. "No," he said, like denial could rewrite ink. Lena didn't move, she didn't flinch. She simply stood there while his control slipped in front of everyone he'd tried to impress. Mark's eyes snapped up and found me across the room, furious and searching for someone to blame. "Who are you?" he barked, loud enough to turn heads. I held his stare without raising my voice. "The person you should taken seriously years ago." For a moment, Mark looked genuinely lost, like a man discovering that intimidation only works on people who still believe they deserve it. He tried anger next. He threw the papers onto a table, called Lena a liar, demanded she explain herself, stepped toward her with that familiar pressure. Lena didn't retreat. "I already did," she told him, quiet and clear. "It's filed." There it was. The sentence he'd spent years training out of her, a complete decision. The party collapsed after that. Guests filtered out in awkward clusters, some offering support, others avoiding eye contact. Everyone suddenly aware that the charming man they knew had a different face at home. The legal process took months, but the outcome was shaped from the beginning by what Mark couldn't talk his way out of. Documents, timestamps, accounts, transfers, proof. He tried playing victim. Courts don't grade on performance, they grade on evidence. When it ended, he lost money, opportunities, and the shiny version of himself he'd curated so carefully. Most importantly, he lost access to Lena. Lena moved into a modest apartment with light in the windows and no cameras watching the couch. "The first time I helped her carry in boxes," she cried before we opened the first one. Not from grief, but from the shock of having a door that stayed locked because she wanted it locked. Months later, we sat on her balcony with coffee. She looked different, not just happier, freer, like her shoulders belonged to her again. She asked me, "When did you know something was wrong?" "I suspected," I said. "For a long time." Her eyes dropped. "I wasted years." "You survived years," I corrected. "That's not the same thing." She blinked hard. "I didn't feel brave." "Courage isn't always running toward danger," I said. "Sometimes it's telling the truth when you've been punished for it. Sometimes it's asking for help while your voice shakes." A year to the day after that text, Lena and I sat on my porch at sunset, the same place I'd read 3 words that changed everything. We didn't talk for a while. Then she asked, "What if I never sent it?" I watched the light sink behind the trees and answered honestly, "I would've found you anyway." That's what sisters do. And I meant it. Because the most important warnings are rarely dramatic. Sometimes they come as a small change in a familiar phrase. Quiet enough that the world ignores it, and sharp enough that the one person who knows you best can't.